Thank you all to whom supported our argument for being against segregation, cultural appropriation, and to be for equal opportunity. First and foremost, look at how African Americans and Caucasians were segregated. Caucasians enforced slavery over African Americans and their culture. Within that African American culture, there are those who are deaf, and they were considered disabled during that time period. With that being said, to state that hearing teachers cannot teach deaf students violates the ADA, which states that deaf people may not be excluded or segregated or to be treated differently. To say that hearing teachers cannot teach deaf students is a clear example of segregation. Also, to say that there is a bridge gap between an interpreter and deaf teachers completely invalidates the purpose of having an interpreter. They are the bridge to the gap. Interpreters are required to be certified, which eliminates one's lack of knowledge or lack of communication. Lastly, to say that a person cannot teach someone due to their disability or vice versa is a clear violation of the EEOC. Isn't it time that people stop and just abolish prejudice and segregation so we can come together and to be treated equal as we should be?
Hello, my name is Sophie Neighbors, and I'm presenting my closing argument for the argument that hearing teachers can indeed teach ASL and teach deaf students. One of the arguments made by the opposing group is that if hearing teachers are prominent in the education of deaf students, then the deaf students will develop a reliance on interpreters. The opposing group made the argument that this reliance is negative because they provided an example that there was an interpreter that sided with students when comments were made near a deaf teacher. They also argued that context is often lost, that not everything is interpreted, and that this lack of appropriate interpretation allows for miscommunication. My argument is that the only way to improve upon contextually accurate interpreting from an ASL interpreter is to work to correct errors, not to eliminate interpreters in the classroom altogether. Instead of minimizing the role of interpreters, we should continue to fight for accurate interpreting for deaf people. From the impact of the coronavirus, we know how important accurate interpreting is. Governor Andrew Cuomo came under fire for not having an interpreter, as well as the White House for having inaccurate interpreting. If hearing teachers are allowed to teach deaf students, the students can become bilingual, and the process of interpreting can improve. Ensuring interpreters improve will support deaf students in the long run, as they will need interpreters throughout their life. Therefore, it is more than appropriate for hearing teachers to teach deaf students and to teach ASL. Thank you.
First and foremost, thank you so much to the corresponding side. Why? They provided sufficient knowledge aiding in the favor of our own position. This strengthened the positive insights of deaf students having access to both hearing and deaf teachers. In the case that Group 1 stated, exposure to deaf culture is more important for their lives, so they can learn how to conduct themselves in the environment. What some people cease to understand is that in an article written by Cindy Bailey's, is that 90% of the students were from hearing families and had a very limited exposure to ASL. This means that they would have a harder time getting into the culture at a fast rate. Having a hearing and deaf teacher allows the students to ease their way into the deaf community and culture at a more congenial rate. Thank you. And this has been Groups 2 closing arguments. Thank you.